All right, we're going to try this again in 1 second, guys. Hope everybody can hear me. All right. That was bad sound the last time. Can everybody hear me now? We're going to try to get rolling here. Keith Niebuhr with Gators Online checking in. Let's see if we can do it right this time. We got some sound interruptions from the Billy Napier press conference. Hopefully everybody can hear us okay. We're going to break down this game in just a second. Florida's 38-14 win over Vanderbilt. And we will be ready to go as soon as a few of you jump on in. All right. Hope everybody's doing great. It was a happy homecoming at Florida Field, the Swamp Spurrier Field at Ben Hill Griffin Stadium. And we're going to break down this game in just 1 second. Hope everybody had a good day. And I think we are ready to roll. All right. Well, this is what the doctor ordered. After a deflating loss last week at Kentucky, Florida needed to kind of get that momentum, that mojo back going into next week's big game at South Carolina. So, look, this wasn't a tough opponent. This was a team that was 2-4, a Vanderbilt team that was 2-4 and hadn't won a game since early in the season, had lost 4 straight, but it's absolutely what Florida needed. And, look, this is a team that is much better at home than it is on the road. And so that was, you knew you were going to get a better Florida team than what we've seen on the road. The question was, would it be enough to make you feel good about the future? And so that's what we're going to be asking people today. Let's see how we are here. I'm just checking out some things on video here real quick. I think we had to start earlier. We had to stop. Billy Napier's press conference sort of got in the way. And I am trying to figure a couple things out here. If we do that, we'll be ready to go. So I appreciate everybody hanging tight with us. Thought I was in a great room, and it turned out the Billy Napier press conference was on and was going to cause me some problems. So, all right. So we don't have a lot of people. We don't have as many people in here as we did before. All right. All right, so let's go over some statistics. Florida's 38-14 win over Vanderbilt. Total yards, 495 for Florida, only 334 for Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt got the bulk of its passing through the air, 276 yards. Florida was pretty balanced, 260 through the air. Graham Mertz was 30 of 36 for 254 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. So a good step forward for the passing game for Florida, although we still didn't see too many shots downfield. They didn't really need them tonight, obviously. Montreal Johnson, 18 carries, 135 yards, 1 touchdown. Florida receiving, not really a strength of the team, but tonight, some promise for the fans, all right? Tonight, 2 freshmen had outstanding games. Tight end Arliss Boardingham, 7 catches for 99 yards and 2 touchdowns. That was significant. Caught the ball, obviously, but made plays after the catch. That's sort of what's been missing from some of the offensive plays this year. Good passes, good catches, but not much after the catch. So Arliss Boardingham, a freshman receiver from California, gave Florida some of that yards after the catch. Today, freshman receiver Eugene Wilson out of Tampa. He's everything we all expected him to be. 8 catches for 64 yards, 1 touchdown. So 3 touchdown catches between the 2 freshmen. That's significant. If you're Billy Napier and company, you're trying to build on this thing. You're trying to show people that you've got some excitement coming in the future, right? So that was promising for Florida. And I thought the offensive line had its best game of the season. Now, obviously, the opponent isn't a great opponent. Let's just be totally honest here. But coming off the game at Kentucky, didn't block great against Charlotte a few weeks ago. So this is kind of the game that the Florida Gators needed on offense. Good balance, passing, running, good yards after the catch, good play calls. And I think people were generally happy with the play calls in this game. And then also, we need to point out Florida was without 3 key players in this game. And so you're thinking, well, is that going to be dicey? Is that going to make it hard for Florida in this game? Kingsley Aguacan, the starting center, out, did not play. Austin Barber, your starting left tackle, out, did not play. ETN, your starting tailback, out, injured, did not play. But the guys responded in their place. I thought the offensive line was outstanding. I never felt like the running game wasn't there. It felt like there were holes the whole game. It felt like Graham Mertz, for the most part, had plenty of time to throw. By the way, he did take some serious shots in that game, and at one point had to leave the game after the first play of the second half. But Graham Mertz was solid behind that offensive line, growing confidence. He doesn't just have Ricky Pearsall to throw anymore. You've got an emerging tight end in Arliss Boardingham. You've got an emerging freshman receiver in Trey Wilson. Now, you've got obviously multiple options on offense. I need to point out another freshman had a really strong game too, and that's freshman running back Treon Webb, who had 4 carries for 70 yards. So now you're developing depth at running back. It didn't matter that ETN didn't play. Normally you would need him against the Georgias and LSUs of the world, but you're developing depth at running back. You're developing young receivers at that position. Your offensive line was, despite having injured guys, missed games throughout the season, and that really does hurt with offensive line chemistry, came together and played its best game of the season. So, Cameron Wade, somebody says, played well. That's what they needed. That's what this team needed. Granted, it's Vanderbilt, but they needed to get some confidence back, needed to start feeling good about themselves again, as now the really tough challenges begin again, starting with the road trip to South Carolina, which I believe was off today. Now, South Carolina is not a great team. It has a very weak offensive line, but it's still going to be a tough place to play because obviously we've seen Florida just look really bad in 2 away games so far this season. But all in all, very big game for Florida tonight. And, you saw them do a lot of things that you haven't really seen them do great. And I think the yards after the catch was the biggest thing, quite frankly. You also saw the defense give up 334 yards, but more than 2/3 of that was in the first half. So the defense came to play in the second half, set the tone. And really the defense had the play of the game in terms of turning the momentum from what was a 7-7 game at one point, and then Florida led 14-7. And Vanderbilt was threatening to score after a long pass. They get down to the Florida inside the 10. Third down pass incomplete. Ball's caught, but it's out of the end zone. Vanderbilt comes back on 4th down. Eschews the field goal, decides to go for it, and that ball falls incomplete. So, that really changed the game because that allowed Florida to keep a 14-7 lead. By the end of the first half, it was 21-7, and you never felt like it was much of a game after that. Florida really seemed to have command throughout most of the second half, if not all of the second half. So all in all, it's hard to find too many complaints in this game. Obviously you're looking at the opponent, you're saying, hey, it's only Vanderbilt. But it was significant in the sense that Florida needed to feel good about itself, needed to regain some confidence, because you have to imagine last week's game had to have been deflating going to Kentucky and really, quite frankly, getting it taken to them and challenging their manhood, if you want to look at it that way. Greg Taft says, enjoy the win, don't dwell. Very young team. And I agree with that. It's, that was significant. All right, so let's look at some final stats here. First downs, Florida 25, Vanderbilt only 13. Third down efficiency, Vanderbilt just 1 of 10. So that's a good sign for your defense, 1 of 10. Obviously an overmatched Vanderbilt team, but 1 of 10. Florida 5 of 12 on third down. So again, you're making some progress there. Again, total yards, Florida 495. I think you could say this was Florida's best offensive game of the year, held Vanderbilt to 334 yards. Rushing attempts, Florida 30 carries for 215 yards. That's 7.2 yards a carry. That's what you expect Florida to do against Vanderbilt. Penalties, fairly even, 8 for 70 for Florida. A couple big ones that kept Vanderbilt drives alive. 5 for 47 for Vanderbilt. 1 turnover each. They were both significant. Vanderbilt fumbled on a 4th down play that they had converted in Florida territory. TJ Searcy's freshman edge stripped the ball, and it was recovered by cornerback Jalen Kimber. That was a big drive stopper for Florida. But also, don't forget, Florida was up 7-0, and Khalil Jackson on a kind of like a halfback or a lateral to the receiver, pass downfield, threw it a little late, and that was picked off, and that killed the Florida drive. So penalties sort of evened out, I would say. Time of possession, big one for Florida. 36 minutes, 58 seconds to only 23 minutes and 2 seconds for Vanderbilt. So, again, significant gain here. Now, this was a team Florida lost to last year. Now, obviously, Florida is a different team at home than it is on the road. And certainly, you play in Nashville, it can be a little chilly outside. It can be a little bit dead in the stands. And you have to give the crowd credit. They announced the crowd tonight, over 89,000. It was fairly lively for a homecoming game against a team that's not that great, and you're coming off of a deflating loss, like we said, to Kentucky. But all in all, a fairly good day. Somebody says Treon Webb played great, the freshman running back. Yes, I mean, a lot of positive signs. You're seeing young guys as they start to learn how to block in pass protection, as they learn more plays, as they get more comfortable out there. This big boy football, this isn't high school anymore. So even a guy like Eugene Wilson, yes, he can catch. Yes, he can do so many things after the catch. But there's other things they ask of receivers, right? There's other things they ask of Treon Webb to do, not just carry the football. So you're starting to see these guys. It's midseason now. They're starting to emerge. So Florida's now 4-2 overall, 2-1 in the SEC with 4 wins in 4 games at the Swamp. Away from home, obviously 0-2. They have to figure that out. You're all making the point that Florida's got to figure out how to get better on the road. South Carolina could be just what the doctor ordered. That's a team with a struggling offensive line. Now, Spencer Rattler's got a strong arm. He can scramble. He can beat you many ways. But South Carolina's offensive line versus Florida's defensive line should be a favorable matchup for the Gators. Now, we will see. But you're right. They have to figure things out on the road, and not just figure things out. They have been humbled on the road in 2 games this year against 2 strong teams. Both Utah and Kentucky are far better teams than South Carolina, primarily because they're better on the line of scrimmage. So Florida has to figure some things out. For starters, they've got to get off to better starts. They've got to get off to better starts. At Utah, you gave up the long touchdown pass on Utah's first play. Kentucky led 16-0 right out of the gate, and it was never really a game after that. So first and foremost, just get out of the gate and be in the game. Just get to the second quarter and get to halftime where you're feeling like you're in the game. So again, South Carolina could be what the doctor ordered. They've not played that great. Actually played fairly well at Georgia before falling apart in the second half. But again, it should be a favorable matchup. It's just at what point do we start seeing Florida do something on the road? Billy Napier has 1 road win in 2 seasons as Florida coach. So can a team with so many newcomers kind of figure this thing out on the road next week? They better, because if you don't beat South Carolina, then producing a winning record, as shocking as this sounds, it's not a guarantee. It's not a guarantee if you beat South Carolina. But if you beat them, you move to 5-2 overall. You would move to 3-1 in the SEC with the week off to get ready for Georgia. The week after Georgia, you play Arkansas at home. Again, they are a different team at the Swamp than they are on the road. After that, you play at LSU, then Missouri at home, and then Florida State at home. So there are many, many difficult challenges ahead, which is why I believe next week's game at South Carolina is really the key game to the whole season. If Florida's going to finish with a winning record, it absolutely positively has to win at South Carolina. All right, so let's go back through some of the key stats in this game. Again, Graham Mertz, Florida's quarterback, 30 of 36 for 254 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. His backup, Max Brown, 4 of 4 for 26 yards. And obviously, Max Brown had to go in the game early in the third quarter when Graham Mertz was sacked and took a pretty good hit. And you didn't know what was going to happen, but we were following Mertz on the sideline. They looked at him at the training table. He was back up, walking around within no time, had his helmet on. Probably could have gone back into that series had Florida gotten a first down, but it did not. Montrell Johnson, 18 carries for 135 yards, 7.5 yards a carry, 1 touchdown. He now has over 2,000 career rushing yards in college. Treon Webb, freshman running back who showed such good promise this whole season, 4 carries for 70 yards. He looks real explosive, and he also looks like a guy that Florida's going to be able to utilize in the passing game in the coming years as well. Ricky Pearsall, some end arounds, 2 carries for 23 yards. Receiving, Arliss Boardingham was really the guy that had so many good plays at the tight end position. People have been wondering, when is he going to get more catches? When are we going to see more of freshman Arliss Boardingham, who's from California? 7 catches for 99 yards and 2 touchdowns. Career highs across the board, 14.1 yards a catch. Some very good yards after contact. There was one play in the second half where he was hit after about a 6 or 7 yard gain, and he ended up getting 12 or 13 yards out of the play. That's what you want to see out of your tight end. And not all those tight ends can stretch the field. They've got to catch the ball in the middle of the field, make people miss, run over people, flatten people, get those extra yards. This is still not a team that's got chunk plays in it. Okay, maybe by the end of the season, but right now it doesn't. Every yard counts, so that's significant. Eugene Wilson, freshman receiver from Tampa, 8 catches for 64 yards, 1 touchdown with a long of 12, but they're throwing him short passes. They're throwing him short passes and letting him do things in space, and he's doing an outstanding job. Ricky Pearsall, another solid game, 4 catches 34 yards, had a really nice punt return at one time. Montrell Johnson, it should be pointed out, also had 3 catches for 25 yards. Khalil Jackson, 4 catches for 24 yards. The defense, Shamar James, 10 total tackles, 1 tackle for loss. Jaden Hill, 6 tackles with a half tackle for loss. Cam Jackson had a half tackle for loss. Tyreek Sapp, I believe, had a sack in the game. Florida also had another sack that Derek Wingo and they had 2 sacks in the game. So another strong effort from the defense after not such a great start. You had the play where the defensive back, I think it was Jason Marshall, fell down and Vanderbilt had the long touchdown. Florida also gave up another long pass early, in the second quarter of the game. But overall, again, Florida was much better. Overall, Florida was much better in the second half on defense. Vanderbilt did have that one quick drive. I think it was 4 plays, 75 yards. But at that point, the game was sort of Florida had command of the game, led 28-7. That made it 28-14. But all in all, after a sluggish start, it was 7-7. And Vanderbilt could have easily made it 14-14. After that sluggish start, it seems like Florida sort of found its groove. The key play of the game, obviously holding Vanderbilt on 4th down in the inside the 10, keeping Vanderbilt out of the end zone, keeping Vanderbilt off the scoreboard on that drive after they'd completed a long pass. So instead of 14-14 or 14-10, you escape, you make it 14 to keep it 14-7. Florida drives to close to midfield. And at that point, punted Vanderbilt deep in territory, and Vanderbilt territory, flipped the field. So that play was significant. Florida didn't go 96 yards and score, but effectively flipped the field, changed the dynamic of the game. Later in the half, Florida goes down and scores a touchdown to go up 21-7 at the half. And I think everybody felt a lot better at that time. Wicked Fresh is asking what happened to Scooby Williams. I do not have any information on him at this time. Our other guys are at the Billy Napier and player press conference after the game. So really, I thought Florida, after that sluggish start, I'd say for the last 2.5 quarters, played some really solid football. For a quarter and a half, you're thinking, oh, God, this is a little too close for comfort. And you would have been thrilled to realize that the final margin would be what it was. It didn't appear like it was going to be like that at all. Neil's saying it seems like Marcus Burke has seemingly fallen off the depth chart. It's just you've got young guys emerging. And when you have young receivers emerging, what you hope, and don't forget Andy Jean is still making a rise. He's still fighting for playing time. It's making for more competitive practices. They're not just throwing guys out there anymore. You're going to have to earn your spot. Then you're going to have to earn catches in the game. Before you earn catches, you're going to have to earn throws. Then you have to catch the ball. So that's what you want because, correct me if I'm wrong, but Florida's receiving group was not strong at all last season. So you're starting to see the reemergence, what you and I, all of us have come to expect out of Florida's receivers historically. Even when Florida wasn't that good in the 70s, even when they ran the wishbone, they had Chris Collinsworth, they had Wes Chandler, they had receivers. They had the first Gaffney, John Gaffney would have been the first. They had another Gaffney. They had receivers even when they ran the wishbone. So you're starting to see a reemergence of Florida at that position. Now, moving forward, what you want to see is these offensive linemen get back. Austin Barber, your starting left tackle. Kingsley Guakin, your starting center. You want them healthy. You want Trevor Etienne back because that's just going to he's probably your best running back. As much as Montrell Johnson played well and filled in admirably today, you want all of them healthy. But if your offensive line can find some continuity and some cohesiveness and build off this performance, and this is crucial because not only did they play well, but guys that haven't been playing a lot got in and performed at a high level. That's going to make the whole line better. Now you're creating depth on the offensive line. Now you're creating more competition Monday through Friday. Well, Friday's a walkthrough day. You don't really do much practice, but Monday through Thursday, you now have more competition. These guys, these backups that came in and played fairly well. That should push the starters. That should push the group as a whole. Perhaps the Florida offensive line can now take a step forward or two because because the teams coming up are all going to have strong defensive lines. LSU, Georgia, FSU, Missouri. A lot of tough challenges ahead. There's no question about it. But I do think what we saw in the last 2.5 quarters was a step in the right direction. But again, we all know this. It's a home game. Florida's a different team at home. They're a different team at home. And now you've got to go on the road and try to figure out What's this magic formula? What is this? So why does Florida as a program have one win on the road in the last 2 seasons? So got to figure that out. And I do think South Carolina is the perfect opponent to figure it out. I mean, Vanderbilt would have been the perfect one. But South Carolina is struggling right now. Now, the only thing is they're healing up. This is their open week, I believe. So they're healing up. So Florida's just got to kind of ride this wave, keep this momentum going. They're going to go to Columbia, South Carolina with some renewed confidence, because I do think last week's game was an ego blow. You can look back to the Utah game and say, if you're Florida, hey, shot themselves in the foot. So many pre-snap penalties, so many dumb mistakes, special teams miscues. But against Kentucky, it was just a physical beating, quite frankly. And those are sometimes more difficult to come back, because it might not have been anything you did. It might have been about who they were versus who you are. So significant for Florida to go back out there, push a team around itself, which it did. 495 yards of offense, held the other team to under 350 yards. So that is significant itself as well. So Florida has to feel very good about this, because let's be honest, guys, we asked this question on our message board. Is this a gimme win? Are you worried about this? And people were generally worried. Would Florida be flat? We knew the atmosphere today wouldn't be like what it was for the Tennessee game, right? It wasn't bad, but it wasn't that big game, right? The noise in the last week, the noise outside the program, did it filter into the program? These kids read these websites that I work for and other sites. They're on social media. They know what people were saying, okay? And so they went out there and they actually did play very hard today. But you could sense after that stop, that key 4th down stop in the red zone of Vanderbilt's offense, you could just kind of sense that the light bulb went off and that the team took it up another notch. So all in all, a good win for Florida, 4-2 overall, 2-1 in the SEC. Vanderbilt now 2-5, 0-3 in the SEC. I want to say 5 straight losses for Vanderbilt. And they did not look like the same team that beat Florida last year. So that might have been a good thing too. That might have been a good thing, because Florida knew so many guys on this team were on that field last year up in Nashville when Vanderbilt really took it to Florida, and you didn't see that this time. So Florida looks like they're going to escape with a win, and they end up with a convincing rout, 38-14. I think if I would have asked any of you yesterday, hey, would you take a 38-14 win over Vanderbilt? I think every single one of you would have said yes. You saw some positives. Graham Mertz, maybe his best game outside of the Tennessee game. It was a complete game for him. 4 quarters of solid throws. Didn't have any bad throws. Didn't have any big mistakes. Didn't take any devastating sacks. Didn't really do anything stupid. The offensive line came together, played its best game of the season. Obviously, Vanderbilt's not Utah. Vanderbilt's not Kentucky. Vanderbilt's not Tennessee. But I felt like they pass blocked and ran blocked on a high level today. Even against Tennessee, the pass blocking, there wasn't much time for Mertz. Everything had to be quick. So a good day for the offensive line, a very good day for the Florida running backs. Montrell Johnson over 100 yards, Treon Webb averaging, 70 yards on 4 carries. The receivers look good. The emergence of the young receivers, Eugene Wilson and the tight end Arlis Boardingham, a couple of freshmen. So now you start feeling a little bit better about Florida. But again, if they don't win at Kentucky, everybody's going to kind of sink back into their hole. And then you got Georgia waiting for you. Now, you do get a week off after South Carolina, so that'll be coming at just the right time. But I think this South Carolina game is so important, not only for this season, but for this program. It would make you one step closer to a 500 record. I know that sounds like not much, but when you've had 2 straight losing seasons, you have to sometimes take what you can get. You've got tough games coming up. If you go on the road and win there, who's to say you can't go to LSU on the road? Who's to say you can't go to Missouri on the road? Who's to say you can't take the fight to Georgia and Jacksonville? So they've got to now prove to themselves that they can go on the road and be competitive. That's the next step in the evolution of this program. If they can't do that, they're never going to get over the hump. And these guys won't be coaching here very long. It's plain and simple. You have to win on the road. And that starts with being competitive on the road. So we'll see what Florida's got in store next week. All right, any questions? I'm Keith Niebuhr with Gators Online, just breaking down this game. We tried to start one of these a little bit right after the game, and it was too loud. Billy Napier's press conference was going on, so I apologize for that. Just, kind of what grade would you guys give the team? I'd say if I went down the list, I'd say a solid A for Graham Mertz at quarterback. No deep throws again. I know that bothers some of you. I thought the running backs were great today. I thought the offensive line, a good solid B. Wouldn't give them too much more. Hey, guys, good comment here. Wouldn't give them too much more than a B because of the competition. But when you factor in that Florida was missing 2 starters on the offensive line and ended up with close to 500 yards, I'd say the offensive line performed at a pretty high level. Receivers, I think it was probably their best game. Yards after the catch, making people miss in the open field. All right. Defensive line had its moments. I mean, it wasn't great early. Vanderbilt was getting Florida wasn't getting much push on a couple of those long passes. There wasn't any pressure on the quarterback, but the defense seemed to settle into things and played much better in the last 2.5 quarters. Linebackers solid. They didn't there weren't missed tackles. The secondary, a couple big plays they gave up, but overall got better as the game went on. All right, Scott says, let's give props to our freshman receivers. They're doing better than anyone would think. That's true. Florida started 2 freshman safeties. So that's significant. You're seeing the emergence of a lot of young guys out there. James Williams says he gives Florida a B overall. Wicked Fresh gives Florida a B minus. India says Florida did better. I agree with that. Look, hey, they lost to this team last year. You can't, look, at this point, every win is significant, whether you win 7-6 or whatever. So to win by 24, really going away, I think that was you're starting to feel a little bit better about things. But again, the key to this whole thing is what can they now do on the road? All right, James Williams, yes, the freshman safeties are our starters moving forward. And Gary says solid B for the Gators. I agree. You want to give them an A, but Vanderbilt's really not very good. You know what I mean? Just not really good. So what are you going to do? You can't give them an A unless you win 65-0. But 38-14, Vanderbilt, they've been run out of the stadium by anybody. They've been fairly competitive. They haven't won. So Florida coming with a solid 24-point win, I think is nice. India says, I think we made a lot of mistakes, but pushed through it. I would agree. The first quarter and a half was sloppy. There's a little malaise out there. That long touchdown pass that Vanderbilt had in the first quarter seemed to really shake Florida. But they bounced back, took the lead. I still contend that the the red zone stand by the Florida defense in the second quarter was really the key moment of the entire game. And quite frankly, I don't know what Vanderbilt was thinking there. I know these coaches rely so much on analytics, but I think you're an 18-point underdog. I get that, but I think if you're Vanderbilt, you take the points there. You just kick the field goal. You're down 14-10. Even if Florida scores again, it's still 21-10. This is mentally, I feel like there's a big difference between 21-10 and 21-7. It felt like it was almost over at halftime because Florida was getting the ball to start the second half. So anyway, overall, not a bad game. I felt like Florida secondary, if you take out those couple plays, played really well. Those long passes weren't pretty, but they got that stuff cleaned up in the second half. Just kind of one of those games, though, where this is what you expect out of Florida, but you still needed to see it. You wanted to see it. You hope to see it. You want to see the offense be more creative, and I think they were tonight. I think there were some beautifully designed plays, taking what Vanderbilt gave them and making Vanderbilt pay for that, quite frankly. If Graham Mertz doesn't beat you, he's not doing dumb things out there. India says Vanderbilt was making desperate decisions. I agree. I just don't agree with. I agree with your thought. I just don't think. I think if you're Vanderbilt, I think you take the points there. 14-10 is you're fighting. You're in that game. You had one long touchdown pass, and that was a really long, nice drive there. It just seemed like a wasted opportunity. I think that was a big mistake by a young coach, quite frankly. So anyway, all right. Well, I think that's probably it. We don't have too much to talk about. It wasn't the not the biggest game on the schedule, but a much needed win for the Florida Gators. Again, 4-2 overall, 2-1 in the SEC. Swamp Fuel says keep throwing downfield next week. I agree. Now you've put some stuff on film. You've got some young receivers. Now South Carolina has to account for Eugene Trey Wilson. Now South Carolina has to account for Artis Boardingham. Now they know that if Treon Webb is in the game, he can do things. Okay. Now Florida's got a three-headed running back monster. The offensive line is looking better. The defensive line potentially could give South Carolina a lot of problems. But it's, again, this is just one step. Next week, Florida can take a big step, a major step, win on the road. You beat South Carolina handily at the Swamp last year. They're going to be motivated for that game, as is everyone who plays the University of Florida. But matchup-wise, it seems like it's the kind of game that Florida should be in. Should have an excellent chance to win. An offensive line on the other team that, quite frankly, has struggled much worse than your offensive line. You've got a solid defensive line. If you can contain quarterback Spencer Rattler, you're going to have a shot. If you can force him into some bad decisions, put him on his back once in a while, you know it's going to be loud there. South Carolina fans always show up when they play Florida. That is a huge game for them. That is a huge game for that program every time they play the Gators at Williams-Brice Stadium. But for Florida, it's now time to take the next step. Fans are getting impatient. This was great, but this is expected. This is what people expect when you're at the University of Florida. They also expect you to go on the road and be competitive. All right, Florida has not been competitive on the road this season. They're going to have to be next week. If you win that game, you're 5-2. You'd be 3-1 in the SEC, and you got a week off before you go to Georgia. Get all your guys healthy. Take a deep breath and get ready for the home stretch. And we haven't seen Georgia play like Georgia has played in recent seasons. So we will see. India says Florida needs to be more aggressive. I think they were plenty aggressive tonight. They didn't do anything stupid, right? But again, it's an evolution, right? The offense has to continue to evolve. A lot of the plays that work tonight wouldn't work against a team in the top half of the SEC, let's be honest. So these are the types of things you need to do against the teams that you should beat by 24 points. And they did. But you don't discount that either. You still have to beat them. All right. That will do it. Final score, Florida 38, South Carolina 14. Another big homecoming win for the Florida Gators at the Swamp. I hope everybody had a safe week, a fun homecoming week. It's always great to come back to Gainesville. I went to school here. I grew up in Gainesville. Good to see family and friends, as always. Much needed feel-good win for the Florida Gators. We'll see what they can do next week. Tomorrow night at Gators Online, on our YouTube page, I'll be joined by Nick Delatorre, and we will break down this game even further, and we'll look ahead to next week's game against South Carolina. Go to GatorsOnline.com. $1 right now. Get your foot in the door. $1. Get you 1 full month of all the best team and recruiting intel and arguably the most enjoyable and entertaining message board community in the Gator market. Also, if you like what we're doing here, like this page, subscribe, leave a comment. It's fine. Sorry about the little hiccup right after the game. I thought we could do it in one area of the stadium, and it turns out we couldn't, so that was my mistake. Hope everybody had a great homecoming. Again, I'm Keith Niebuhr with Gators Online. Take care, everybody.